that they can put the ball in his hands and he can make things happen, get in the end zone every time he touches the football. Chris?
All right, Mark, we'll stay with you there. I mean, we'll come back to you and see what the Eagles are doing. Rich Kotite and company mulling over their depth chart at the running back position. You know, Herschel Walker has had a couple of productive seasons for the Eagles, certainly, but he just gained 746 last year. There is some tread on that tire, see? Heath Barr, over 400, but yet obviously there's some room for improvement there. And Mel, if you were to rate the board and then kind of figure who the Eagles would like, look at your running back board. Who would you choose?
I think the running backs are a quality group right now. We talk about LaShawn Johnson. He had that shoulder injury early in the year that kind of pushed him down a little bit, but he can get outside. He can really do a job like a Ricky Waters can as far as taking on people at 200 pounds. Mario Bates, great junior running back. You're talking about a guy in next year's draft. Had he gone back, top 5 pick overall. Charlie Garner is not that big, but Don Shula made several comments at the Senior Bowl that he thought Garner could carry the ball 20 to 25 times a game and have no problem. Eric Rett doesn't have game-breaking speed, but is a good all-purpose back. He can blitz block. He can catch the football very well. Chuck Levy from Arizona is another guy who can do a lot for you as a quarterback on the 2-point conversion. #1 kickoff returner in the country. So it's a lot of backs there, a lot of quality. As I said before, this is about the spot where Rodney Hampton went to the New York Giants.
Well, we have word that perhaps the Eagles and Cleveland Browns, Joe, are talking a little bit of trade. And the Browns, of course, obviously that will be for their second-round pick, which is not till number 40 overall, so that's not till 11 from now. Let's go to Mort in Indianapolis. We mentioned the name Charlie Garner, who's obviously a heck of a talent, but there's some question about Mort. Fill us in on what's right and maybe what some teams might view might be a little bit wrong with Garner.
Chris, when you're a player agent, you have highs and lows, and Tom Condon of the International Management Group represents Heath Schuler of Tennessee, but he also represents Charlie Garner of Tennessee. And Charlie Garner, Chris, had a positive drug test for marijuana at the Indianapolis Scouting Combine, and it has definitely affected his draft rating. And as a plan of action, Condon sent letters to all the NFL clubs this week, and basically you can see in the first paragraph, he acknowledges the positive test on marijuana. He does say that Charlie claims that this was secondary smoke, that he was in a room that was poorly ventilated, and that Charlie was not smoking marijuana himself, as you see here. And this is an issue, of course, that NFL teams take very seriously, regardless of the excuse. Now, Condon has proposed a 5-point plan to NFL clubs on how to deal with this. One is that Charlie Garner submit a urine sample, and he has already done that, provided with negative results. Submitting a psychological and substance abuse evaluation, which has already been done, and he supposedly got a fairly favorable rating recommendation there. And he has volunteered to comply with the NFL drug testing program. And not only that, but in addition to testing for drugs the rest of his NFL career, he will tie his compensation the rest of his career to testing negative all the way. Now, there's one other issue that popped up in which Condon sent more letters to the NFL clubs this morning, which Charlie Garner did have an arrest when he was a high school senior in Fairfax, Virginia, for a cocaine possession. However, as Condon explained to the NFL clubs today, Charlie says that he was simply with a group of teenagers on a street corner, and the charges were dropped. There's nothing on the police record to indicate that Charlie Garner had any cocaine on him, but it's just a problem that Garner has to deal with, a very unfortunate circumstance for a very talented running back. Chris?
Mort, let me ask you a question here for a moment, but let's say that the trade that we talked about between Philadelphia and Cleveland did go down. We don't have the details yet, but Cleveland will now pick in this last spot in the first round. I tell you what, we have details, what of the pick and the trade, and then more. We'll get right back to you, so don't go anywhere.
By trade, Cleveland acquired the Philadelphia choice and has selected Derek Alexander, wide receiver from Michigan. Cincinnati is next on the clock.
Well, that'll make sense for sure. Derek Alexander, the tall wide receiver from Michigan. Well, let's wrap up with you first, as the first round has now been completed.
As you know,
how many teams will really take what Condon has said and have it not affect where they draft Garner? I mean, do you think that'll affect half and not affect half? You think it's affected all of them? How do you see this coming out, the letter, et cetera, from Condon?
I think it's affected all of them. I think it's knocked Charlie Garner out of maybe a late first-round pick to somewhere in the middle second round. I think the 49ers actually considered Charlie Garner. These things do hurt you. And of course, what drug hurts you? Marijuana, and even if you mention cocaine, though there's no police record of it, I think it scares teams off. Derek Alexander, who was just taken, had 2 DUI arrests. It affected him. He finally went at 29. So I think teams take it pretty seriously. The majority of them do.
Cleveland's second choice.
All right, Mart, thank you. Let's get the details on this trade.
Second choice in the 1995 draft.
All right, if I'm going to get that right.
So Philadelphia traded this choice for Cleveland's second this year, which is the 40th overall, and Cleveland's second in 1995.
So the trade is the Browns move up to pick that late first-round pick here to pick Derek Alexander. The Eagles move down 11 slots, get a second, and they get a 2 from Cleveland next year. The Browns now are hoping for a little repeat of history. This is the first time they've had 2 first-round picks since 1978. Now, they picked Antonio Langham and Derek Alexander today. In 1978, they picked Clay Matthews and Ozzie Newsome. So if history has anything to do with it, these guys will be loved in Cleveland. Derek Alexander. This is something that the Browns felt they need to, Joe, to upgrade their wide receiver spot. They got Michael Jackson.
Right, they have Michael Jackson. Now, I think what is very interesting here is you have to remember that the Cleveland Browns were very much involved in a trade to try and get Alvin Harper. So that ought to tell you that they needed a complimentary receiver. They went out and got one in the draft. They also felt like Alexander, as they rated the wide receivers, was the best in the draft. So they get exactly what they want from their evaluations. I think this is a good move for Cleveland. You trade the second in 95, hoping that it's not going to be but a very late pick. If Cleveland gets production out of their ball club, it could be in the 20s, and it looks like a good move.
I think Derek Alexander was a little overrated, Joe. I look at a guy who had a season-ending knee injury in 1990, came back from it, regained his speed. He's been running 4.46s. But throughout the year at Michigan, dropped a lot of catchable balls. Route running wasn't that tremendous. You'll see him here making some plays, catching the football there. This is in the East-West Shrine game here, getting deep in the Big Ten against Illinois. But he dropped some passes. He has the size you want. Here's a punt returner. This is in their bowl route of NC State. He goes the distance on a punt return. But as a pure receiver, Joe, he's got some things to learn about the position.
Well, I think what you're talking about, Mel, though, every kid I think who's going to come in is going to have something to learn about the wide receiver position. I think that what you have to understand, though, as he comes in as a rookie, he probably isn't going to start right away, and he's going to be given that opportunity to learn. I still think he comes in with the size. Again, I have to go back. Look at the interest that was in Alvin Harper. Big wide receiver, big guy on the other side for Vinny Testaverde. I think that he fills the need, and they hope will develop.
Let's move on to the coach, Mike Gottfried, about Derek Alexander. A risk here or not really, Coach?
No, I don't think it's a risk at all. Matter of fact, I think he's the best receiver in the draft. He's 6'1", 190, 4.40, returns punts, returns kickoffs, makes the tough catches. If he didn't have the off-the-field concerns that everybody talks about, I mean, he'd be a higher draft pick than he is right now. I think it's a great choice for Cleveland. They get 2 picks in the first round. Derek Alexander gives them a long ball threat. I think it really is a good choice.
All right, Coach, it now can be said that the first round is history. It took 4 hours and 56 minutes to complete it. It is the second longest first round in the history of the NFL draft. Admittedly, there are 29 picks, but yet almost 5 hours. Steamrolling ahead. We'll be back.
Zay, you're out for a beer. What do you have? Beer. What if there wasn't any beer?
Sorry, guys. Never heard of it. Oh, Zima. Zima's good. There you go. What is this? No, just seem as a unique alcohol beverage. I kind of like it. Anything else?
You got pretzels? What day is this?
Hey, is that what I think it is?
Yeah, it's my new Wagner Power Painter.
Well, can you edge with it?
Yeah, you can edge like this or adjust it to control the paint up close. And when I'm done, I'm gonna switch nozzles and stain my deck. Do a lot of other jobs I've been meaning to do.
Well, does it clean up easy?
Yeah, it's quicker than you think.
Why am I painting this by hand?
Good question. Get a Wagner.
Play. John McEnroe won 115 titles with Dunlop rackets.
Achoo! Bless you.
How will our new revelation affect his performance?
Quiet, please.
The Revelation's unique construction flexes to help you place the ball more accurately, offering every player
Ball was good. Game, set, match, McEnroe.
outstanding control.
And we move on to the second round here at the NFL Draft. The 29 picks in the first round. And after a huge split early on for defense, the offense caught up. 16 defensive players, 13 offensive. Quarterbacks 2 and the running backs 3 and the receivers 4, O-line 4. D-line, or those projected to be D-line, some that played backer at college, 9. So that's a huge number. Linebackers 3, defensive backs 4. There are 11 underclassmen who went in the first 29 picks. So I believe that's about as large a number as I can recall. And certainly they have never gone 1 and 2, and they went 1, 2, and 3. Let's check back into Indianapolis with Chris Mortensen first of all, we should say that the Bengals have selected their pick in the second round, the first pick in the second round, wide receiver Darnay Scott from San Diego State. So the Bengals now go for a deep threat, which they needed, and that's what they've done. Now let's go to Chris Mortensen down in Indianapolis as they got their quarterback Heath Schuler. So what do the Redskins do to help him out, Mort?
Well, you know, the Bengals were talking about Darnay Scott or Trey Johnson, the Temple offensive lineman, and I think the Redskins are going to jump all over Trey Johnson of Temple here. They do need somebody to block for Heath Schuler. They've got some good running backs there, and, you know, Norv Turner knows the value of offensive linemen. I think that's the way they're going to go here.
All right, Mort, thank you. Joe, your comments on the Redskins, what do you think they're doing?
Well, I think they could look for some help in the defensive secondary. I wouldn't be surprised if it's who's that second safety, Mel? Help me out here.
It's Sehorn.
Sehorn. Yeah, I think Sehorn, Jason Sehorn is a guy who I think can really help this ball club out. I don't think they need to go running back. They certainly have a lot. Maybe a stretch here would be a fullback. I really feel like one of the areas that the Redskins have really suffered in the last 5 years has been lack of production out of the fullback position. They just didn't have somebody who could get it done in short yardage and goal line situations for them. It maybe is a stretch here, probably a fullback on the board later on. That's the way I think it'll go.
Darnay Scott, Mel, let's backtrack to the Bengals. A guy that some feel that after 2 or 3 years, maybe the best of all of these receivers, but yet maybe this year not quite as polished. Your thoughts?
Well, I think, the thing that bothers people about Darnay Scott is the system and the competition and the whack that he goes up against. Now, I think when you look at Darnay Scott, you see a tall, angular receiver, caught a lot of balls, had some periods where he dropped some catchable passes, but when the big part of each game he showed up, here, look at the adjustment to the football. Against Air Force this year, he caught a pass on a 4th down play that won the football game. Here he extends when he beat the cornerback on a deeper route. Here he catches in traffic. Look at the open field running ability here. Tackle breaker. I think he's a good pick. I mean, when you're talking about Jeff Query as your top receiver in Cincinnati, Carl Pickens had some injury problems. If he comes back this year, you now have your third option and a guy that may be able to push for a starting job.
All right, so Darnay Scott, the first pick in the second round. The Redskins have made...
Washington's selection in the second round, Trey Johnson, tackle Temple. Trey Johnson, tackle Temple. Indianapolis is on the clock.
He's a very good athletic offensive lineman. Could play tackle, could play guard. And so the